Have you ever wondered why just one comment from someone can ruin your entire day? Why do some people seem to drain your energy without lifting a finger, leaving behind confusion, exhaustion, and frustration? And more importantly, what if everything you've been taught about dealing with people like this is completely wrong? You may have believed that the pain caused by toxic words comes from your own weakness or hypersensitivity, or maybe you simply never learned how to truly protect yourself. But the uncomfortable truth is, most of us have been trained to react, not to respond, to surrender our emotional power at the first sign of conflict or manipulation. But what if everything you believed about handling toxic people was upside down? What if real power isn't about fighting back louder, but about mastering the art of absolute emotional control? In this video, you'll uncover how, often without realizing it, you've been allowing toxic people to influence your emotional state. More importantly, you'll learn exactly how to reclaim that power for good. Picture this: you're standing guard over something precious, your peace, your joy, your emotional balance. You've built this internal sanctuary carefully, brick by brick, strong but not rigid, safe but open to life. And then someone shows up, not with a wrecking ball, but with a whisper, a helpful comment that sounds more like a judgment, a perfectly placed guilt trip that makes you question your own memory. Suddenly, your fortress feels less stable. You second-guess yourself. Your confidence starts to fade. The edges of your clarity blur. That sensation isn't random. It's the trace of a toxic presence. Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you judge it that causes suffering." Recognizing a toxic person isn't just about spotting their external behavior. It's about understanding your internal reaction to them. Toxicity doesn't gain power because of what it is. It gains power because of how it stirs chaos inside you. A friend who always points out flaws might seem harmless at first, just small jabs at your decisions, your goals, or your abilities. But over time, those little comments pile up. They become a burden, quietly corroding your self-esteem. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The moment you start to identify toxic patterns, to name them, to see them clearly, you begin to take back the emotional real estate you've unknowingly surrendered. Because toxicity isn't always loud. Sometimes it's cloaked in kindness. Sometimes it's the person who's always the victim, drawing guilt and sympathy to subtly gain control. Other times, it's the silent manipulator, dropping passive-aggressive remarks, offering cold silences, or playing word games that leave you emotionally off balance. Marcus Aurelius wisely said, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." Understanding that these manipulations are nothing more than skewed perceptions and intentional distortions helps you detach from their emotional weight. Calling out toxic behavior for what it is doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It's an act of emotional courage. You begin to see who supports your peace and who slowly chips away at it. It's a turning point, a stoic awakening where you decide that your emotional well-being is no longer negotiable. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." When you learn to recognize toxic threats, you stop imagining yourself as helpless and start realizing you are the architect of your inner world. You build higher walls of self-awareness. You reinforce your boundaries with logic. You guard your mental space with mindful presence. And in doing that, you discover something powerful. The first and most essential step in dealing with toxic people isn't confrontation, it's recognition. Because once seen clearly, toxic individuals lose their greatest weapon, your unconscious participation in their game. Have you ever paused to wonder why certain people consistently disrupt your peace? It's easy to blame their negativity or manipulation. But what if the real reason is your own fear of setting boundaries? Many of us avoid drawing lines because we fear conflict or we're afraid of being seen as selfish. We carry the false belief that boundaries will push people away. But as Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think of your emotional world as a beautiful garden, carefully planted, watered with patience, nurtured with intention. Now imagine that boundaries are the fences you build, not to isolate, but to preserve. Gentle, firm lines that say, "This space is sacred." Without them, weeds creep in, the constant complainer at work, the friend who guilts you into everything, the relative who offers support wrapped in subtle judgment. They walk right in because there's no clear gate telling them to stop. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding the things that lie beyond our control." And this is where boundaries become powerful. They free you, free from emotional manipulation, free from energy vampires, free from the weight of expectations you never agreed to carry. Carl Jung offered another profound reminder. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And here's the catch. You can't become your true self if you're constantly bending to accommodate toxic behavior. Without boundaries, you don't evolve, you dilute. When you clearly express what's okay and what's not, you're not punishing others. You're standing rooted in your integrity. It's not cruelty to say, "That's not acceptable." It's clarity. It's kindness to yourself and to them. And in that clarity, something powerful happens. Real relationships grow stronger. Manipulative ones fade. Still, let's be honest. Just thinking about setting boundaries can stir anxiety. What if they get angry? What if they walk away? That's where Stoicism offers deep reassurance. Seneca reminds us, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Often, the confrontation we fear never even happens. And when it does, the people who push back the hardest usually reveal exactly why the boundary was needed in the first place. Their discomfort with your limits doesn't reflect your coldness. It reflects their dependency on overstepping. Boundaries at their best also build trust. They show others how to engage with you respectfully. They guide relationships toward mutual understanding instead of silent resentment. Picture this. You're in a conversation where your needs are heard. You express yourself without guilt. You don't over-explain, over-apologize, or second-guess. That's what healthy boundaries make possible. They don't create walls. They create direction. But here's where it gets tricky. What happens when you do all the right things? Stay calm, clear, assertive, yet the toxic person keeps coming back, still pushing, still poking, still trying to drag you into emotional chaos? Why? Because for them, it was never about logic. It was always about your reaction. They feed on it. They thrive on drama like parasites on a host. And when arguing or guilt trips no longer work, they evolve. Subtle jabs, passive-aggressive silence, backhanded compliments, carefully chosen words meant to lure you back in. So what's the move then? Outsmart them? Debate harder? Stand your ground louder? Or is the real answer something far more unexpected? What if your greatest weapon is becoming boring? This is where the Stoic concept of apatheia comes in. Not apathy in the modern sense, but a serene detachment from anything outside your control. You care, but you don't cling. You feel, but you don't react. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed." He wasn't ignoring pain. He was pointing to a deeper truth. The moment you stop playing their game, the game ends. Imagine being like a smooth river stone. The insults, the drama, they rush over you, but they don't stick. You don't flinch. You become invisible to their hooks, uninteresting to their chaos. After learning how emotional neutrality can disarm toxic behavior, the next step is learning how to apply that calm again and again when manipulation becomes persistent. Imagine this. Someone throws a manipulative remark your way. Maybe it's meant to guilt you, provoke you, or make you doubt yourself. But instead of snapping back or defending your stance, you simply respond with a quiet, steady, or maybe. That's interesting. Or even silence. No eye rolls, no sarcasm, no long-winded justification, just stillness, flat, calm, emotionally ungraspable. It's the verbal equivalent of giving them nothing to hold on to. And when you stop feeding the fire, what happens? It dies. Because toxic people aren't empowered by their words. They're empowered by your reaction to their words. Take that away and what's left? Just someone talking to themselves. And that's where this strategy becomes so unexpectedly powerful. You reclaim your peace without shouting. You hold your ground without needing applause. You become a mirror that reflects nothing back. And in that quiet, without drama, without a scene, the manipulative person is confronted not by your anger, but by their own emptiness. It's uncomfortable for them. At first, it'll feel unnatural. Everything in you will scream, "Say something! Defend yourself!" But Stoicism teaches the discipline of restraint. It reminds us that real strength isn't about winning arguments. It's about not needing to win at all. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." And sometimes bravery looks like saying nothing, not because you're avoiding conflict, but because you refuse to get swept into someone else's storm. Now, it's one thing to recognize manipulation when it comes wrapped in charm or guilt. But what happens when it doesn't stop? Manipulative people don't just try once. They circle back. They test your limits, not once, but repeatedly. They're subtle, like water dripping on stone, not enough to break you in one blow, but enough to wear you down over time. You say no, they wait. You hold the line? They soften their approach, hoping you'll bend just a little. Eventually, if you're not careful, they don't overpower you. They outlast you. That's where most people fold. Not because they're weak, but because they're tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of setting the same boundaries. Tired of being the only one playing fair. But here's a Stoic truth worth remembering. If you are irritated by every rub, how will your mirror be polished? Marcus Aurelius' strength isn't avoiding discomfort. It's enduring it with calm. And when it comes to manipulation, the strongest response is quiet consistency. You don't escalate. You don't waver. You don't change your answer. You say, "No, I'm not comfortable with that. No, I already said I can't help with this. No, this isn't up for discussion." Each statement is a calm anchor in turbulent waters. This is what confuses manipulators. They expect pushback, frustration, outbursts. Emotional chaos is their playground. But when you don't feed the chaos and you don't change the script, they run out of moves. It's called the broken record technique, and it's beautifully stoic in its simplicity. You don't try to convince. You don't try to be liked. You don't even try to be understood. You simply hold the line. Epictetus once said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." And in moments like these, every calm repetition becomes a reflection of your inner strength. Think of it like fencing. You don't swing wildly, you don't try to overpower, you block, you parry, you stay centered, and eventually the opponent tires. The same is true emotionally. When you stay grounded with grace, not aggression, you become immovable. And that is where your true power lives. Not in shouting matches or dramatic exits, but in quiet, unshakable presence. Some battles aren't loud. They don't come with yelling or blatant insults. They show up in the form of backhanded comments, sarcasm disguised as compliments, or passive-aggressive jabs. You've heard them. "Oh, I guess you're too busy for real friends. Wow, must be nice to not care what anyone thinks." These aren't just throwaway lines, they're hooks. Carefully disguised bait, crafted to pull you into an emotional tug-of-war. And the moment you react, defend, explain, snap back, you've bitten. Now you're no longer observing the game. You're playing it. This is where most people lose control. Not in dramatic showdowns, but in the quiet invitations to lose their calm. And this is exactly why Stoic philosophy warns us not to let others dictate our emotional state. Epictetus put it simply: if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. It sounds harsh, but it's true, because bait only works if you bite. Let's be clear, this doesn't mean shutting down emotionally. It doesn't mean pretending you're above it all. True detachment requires emotional intelligence, the ability to feel a spark of anger, the heat of offense, and still choose not to act on it. Carl Jung spoke about integrating the shadow, those darker impulses we usually suppress. This isn't about denying anger or frustration. It's about mastering them, because strength isn't found in suppression. It's found in the choice. I will not let someone else steer my emotional ship. An insult only has power if you let it settle inside you. Manipulation only works if you take the bait and start justifying your worth. Picture the toxic person as a fisherman, calm, patient, watching. Every passive-aggressive jab is a lure. Every guilt trip, a shiny hook. They're testing your reactions, studying your sensitivity, waiting for that one crack in your calm. But what happens when you don't bite, when you don't flinch, when you don't explain, defend, or justify? When your stillness becomes louder than any rebuttal? That's silence. It isn't coldness. It's not emotional apathy. It's what the Stoics called apatheia. Not the absence of feeling, but the refusal to suffer unnecessarily. You're not being numb, you're being wise. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." When someone pushes your buttons and you choose not to react, you aren't suppressing emotions, you're studying them. You're learning which triggers exist and why. In that moment of non-reaction, you hold up a mirror. And in that mirror, you don't just see their tactics, you see your patterns. And the clarity that follows, that's where the power lies. Because detachment isn't about turning emotions off. It's about refusing to let someone else weaponize your emotions against you. And here's the beautiful twist. When you no longer respond to bait, the game loses its appeal. The toxic person loses interest. Why? Because without your reaction, there's no reward. It's not fun anymore. It's not effective. It's not powerful. This kind of emotional neutrality isn't weakness. It's choice. It's strength. You're not retreating because you don't care. You're stepping back because you care too much about your peace, your clarity, your self-respect. There's a strange, silent kind of power in stillness. It doesn't beg to be heard. It doesn't scramble to be understood. It simply stands, calm, grounded, immovable. Yet we live in a culture that glorifies the clapback, the last word, the savage comeback. We're told, don't let it slide. Prove your point. Put them in their place. But have you ever stopped to ask, who does that really serve? Because most toxic people aren't chasing truth. They're chasing control. And every time you argue, defend, or explain, you're handing them energy. You're stepping into the arena they built just for you. They throw words like daggers, hoping you'll swing back. But when you don't, when you answer with calm silence, you take the stage from them, you disrupt their rhythm, you break the script they practiced in their mind. Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. And what's more, unlike chaos than calm. What's more defiant than not reacting at all? Silence in this case is not passive. It's deliberate. It's the sound of control. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." And isn't silence in the face of provocation one of the greatest forms of adversity? Because silence tests your ego. It challenges your pride. It dares you to rise above when everything in you wants to strike back. But when you hold the line just once, you begin to see something clearly. The toxic person never had power. The only thing they ever held was your reaction. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, those dark, reactive parts of us that we try to suppress. Choosing silence isn't denying the shadow, it's mastering it. Just because anger rises doesn't mean you must act on it. Just because your pride is bruised doesn't mean it deserves a monologue. Silence in that moment is not running away from the shadow. It's saying, I see you, but you don't drive the car. And here's what happens when a toxic person loses their audience. They lose their power. They're performers without a stage. Their drama, their bait, their script, none of it works when you refuse to join the play. Yes, they may escalate at first. They may try new angles, louder tones, sharper jabs. But eventually, they get the message. You're not in the audience anymore. You're not here to applaud or react. And that devastates them because they can't control what they can't provoke. Silence becomes your armor, your declaration, not of indifference, but of self-respect. In that silence, you're not saying nothing. You're saying, you no longer have access to me. Your chaos ends where my calm begins. I am not yours to provoke. But what if the toxic person isn't a stranger? What if it's someone close, someone you can't walk away from? A parent, a sibling, a colleague you sit next to every day. When that closeness becomes a trap and cutting ties isn't an option, what then? You can't block them. You can't mute them. You can't move to another city just to breathe easier. So the question becomes, how do you stay centered when distance isn't possible? How do you protect your energy when the one draining it shares your dinner table or your office space? This is where physical boundaries reach their limit, and mental detachment becomes your secret weapon. The Stoics knew this dilemma well. Epictetus reminded us, it's not things themselves that disturb us. It's not just what people say or do that unsettles you. It's what you make of it. It's how you receive it, how you internalize it. And most importantly, that's something you can control. You may not be able to stop someone from being passive-aggressive. You may never change how they twist your words or play the victim, but you can absolutely change the way you relate to it. Imagine yourself as a scientist observing a behavior. Calm, neutral, curious. Someone makes a snide remark or drops a guilt-laced comment. Instead of reacting, you pause. You mentally name it. That's manipulation. That's criticism disguised as concern. That's frustration, not fact. You don't absorb the emotion. You study it. You start to see patterns, not personal attacks. And in that shift, from participant to observer, everything transforms. You're no longer inside the emotional storm. You're watching it drift past, untouched. You are the calm, the unmoved, the aware. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That irritation, that sting, it's often not about them. It's about the parts of us that still need healing, clarity, strength. Mental detachment doesn't mean ignoring the pain. It means giving yourself the space to examine it with honesty. To ask, why does this trigger me? What part of me still feels unsafe or unseen? What strength do I still need to develop? And the beauty of this kind of detachment, it doesn't require confrontation. You don't have to change them. You simply stop handing them control over your state of mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And when you truly realize it deeply, something shifts. You no longer need them to apologize. You no longer wait for them to understand your boundaries. Your peace no longer depends on their behavior. This doesn't make you passive. You can still speak up. You can still hold firm, kind boundaries. But now, you do it without the emotional entanglement. You stop feeding the dynamic with reactivity. And slowly, you reclaim your emotional autonomy. Of course, this isn't easy. Mental detachment is not a switch. It's a practice. You will stumble. You'll feel triggered. But each time you catch yourself, pause, and choose awareness over absorption, you grow stronger. You become the quiet in the chaos, the stillness in the storm, and eventually you stop dancing to the rhythm of someone else's dysfunction. There's a quiet power that comes from knowing you're not alone in this work, not in the silent battles you fight, not in the emotional storms you endure with a steady face. Even the strongest minds can waver in isolation. Even the most disciplined hearts need a place to rest. The Stoics, often thought of as solitary sages, actually placed great value on community. Seneca once wrote, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve." To the Stoics, virtuous companionship wasn't optional, it was essential, because the people around you shape your thoughts. They challenge or reinforce your values. They either anchor you or pull you off course. Ask yourself, when you speak your truth, do they listen or do they dismiss? When you're emotionally drained, do they offer clarity or add chaos? Carl Jung described relationships as chemical reactions. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Your relationships are never neutral. They either strengthen your boundaries or blur them. They either nourish your growth or drain it. Toxic people distort reality. They gaslight. They criticize. They wear you down with subtle jabs and constant negativity. But a healthy support system? It acts like your compass. It points you back to truth when you're disoriented. It reflects your worth back to you when you've forgotten it. It says, you're not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're simply human. That kind of validation isn't weakness. It's recovery. It's healing in action. And here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Sometimes the people we've known the longest are part of the problem. Support isn't about history, it's about harmony. It's about shared values, mutual respect, and a commitment to growth. It might come from a close friend, a therapist, an online community, even a mentor you've never met, but whose words guide you daily. What matters is intention. Are you choosing people who reflect your ideals? Who hold space for your vulnerability without trying to fix or silence it? Marcus Aurelius said, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive. To be alive, to think, to love, to enjoy." Marcus Aurelius once said it's a privilege. But how often do we feel that privilege when we're surrounded by emotional sabotage? The truth is, to live fully, with peace and presence, you need more than just willpower. You need spaces where your mind can rest. You need people with whom your heart can breathe. And strangely, we often treat everyone else better than we treat ourselves. We fight for our friends. We defend our loved ones. We offer compassion to strangers on their worst day. But when it comes to ourselves, we minimize. We push through stress. We say, "I'll rest later," while running on fumes. Why? Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that self-care is selfish, that unless we're collapsing, we don't deserve to pause. But the Stoics knew better. Strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about how wisely you recover. Even Marcus Aurelius, an emperor with the weight of Rome on his shoulders, carved out time to reflect, to write, to breathe. In his meditations, he wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." That wasn't poetry. It was strategy. When the world gets loud, when pressure mounts and emotions swirl, your first responsibility isn't to power through. It's to retreat inward, to nourish that quiet place so you can return whole, not hollow. Self-care in its truest form isn't about indulgence. It's about reinforcing your emotional and mental boundaries from the inside out. It's the small daily pause, the honest check-in. The moment you ask, "What have I been ignoring that I need right now?" Maybe it's movement, a quiet walk, a bike ride, a run. Maybe it's stillness, meditation, journaling, 5 minutes of breathing room between demands. Maybe it's creative expression, writing, painting, building something with your hands. Whatever recenters you, whatever reconnects you with now, that's your medicine. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And becoming anything meaningful, anything resilient, requires protecting your energy. Because if you don't, others will take it from carelessness or chaos. Not always with malice, but with impact all the same. Toxic people prey on the unguarded, on the emotionally depleted, on those too tired to hold the line. But when your inner world is full, when you've taken care of it with intention, manipulation loses its grip. The bait doesn't land. The drama has nowhere to stick. Why? Because your inner space has no vacancy. And yet, we forget this. Often, we say, I don't have time. We convince ourselves that others' needs come first. We push and pour until there's nothing left to give. But here's your Stoic reality check. How can you serve anyone if you're running on empty? Seneca said it best. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And one of the greatest wastes, spending all your energy on others while saving none for yourself. It's not noble, it's not sustainable, it's a slow road to burnout and bitterness. Now let's talk about something else we often get wrong, taking things personally. You're human. When someone lashes out, criticizes you, mocks you, it hits. It stings. Your mind races. What did I do? Did I deserve that? Is there something wrong with me? But here's a liberating truth that most people never hear. Much of the toxicity aimed at you has nothing to do with you. That harsh tone, that unpredictable mood swing, that guilt trip or silent treatment, those are symptoms of someone else's inner chaos, not reflections of your value. Think about it. When someone is drowning in fear, shame, or insecurity, that energy has to go somewhere. And if they've never learned how to process it, they project. You just happen to be in the line of fire. Carl Jung called this projection the act of casting our own disowned traits onto others. He wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And the reverse is just as true. Everything that irritates others about you often reveals more about them than it does about you. Now imagine seeing that clearly without absorbing it. Picture someone's negativity like a storm cloud passing overhead. You can feel the pressure, the chill, but you don't have to stand in the rain. Their darkness doesn't define your light. The sky, your sky, remains vast and untouched. That's what Stoicism teaches. Epictetus said, other people's opinions are none of your concern. A radical idea, especially today, but one that brings profound peace, because when you internalize that truth, something unlocks. Their disapproval doesn't make you wrong. Their anger doesn't make you a failure. Their bitterness isn't your burden. It's not that you stop caring. It's not about emotional numbness. Clarity doesn't mean coldness. It means seeing things as they are, without the emotional fog. You can have deep empathy for someone in pain, without carrying the weight of that pain on your back. You can understand that their cruelty is often rooted in their wounds, without letting it distort your reality. You stop dancing to the rhythm of their dysfunction and start moving to the beat of your own truth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject. And when the subject is your life, your mind, your worth, your peace, who knows more than you? So why keep giving power to those who haven't earned it? Why let someone else's unresolved trauma rewrite your story? It's a hard pill to swallow, especially when it's someone you love. You see their pain. You understand their trauma. You watch them sabotage themselves, and you want to help. So you stay. You explain. You forgive. You offer solutions, second chances, 1,000 new beginnings. hoping one of them will finally be enough to make them change. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. And the longer you try, the more it drains you. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, until one day you wake up exhausted, disconnected from yourself, wondering how you drifted so far from your own peace. Carl Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it, and that includes other people, especially those so wrapped in ego, denial, or unhealed pain that they can't even see the problem, let alone be ready to face it." When you take on the role of fixer, you unknowingly assume a burden that was never yours. A burden that doesn't just weigh heavy, it has no bottom, because no matter how much love, logic, or support you give, true change must come from within them. It's not a rescue mission. It's a personal decision they have to make, alone. Epictetus said, "It is not in our power to have whatever we want, but to do what we ought to do, to be true to ourselves." And that's where your real power lies, not in changing others, but in consistently embodying your own values, quietly, firmly, without apology. Lead by example. Set your standard. Then step back. Because true influence doesn't come from control. It comes from presence. It comes from being so grounded in your own peace and growth that others can't help but notice. And if they're ready, maybe they'll shift too. Not because you pushed them, but because you showed them what peace can look like. Still, it's tempting to think, maybe if I just explain it differently, maybe if I find the right time, the perfect tone, the most compassionate words, they'll finally wake up. But that kind of hope, however noble, can become a trap. The more you focus on their healing, the more you neglect your own. You put your journey on pause, trying to carry theirs. And before long, their chaos becomes your normal. Their moods dictate your peace. Their drama becomes the air you breathe. And that's when you realize you're no longer helping them heal. You're just bleeding next to them in the same wound. Seneca once wrote, "Show me a man who is content with his lot, and I will show you a man who has mastered himself." And mastering yourself sometimes means stepping away, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of peace, the calm, quiet recognition that their path is theirs, and yours is yours. You can love someone deeply. You can offer space, support, and compassion. But you can't walk their path for them. You can't want their healing more than they do. So what do you do instead? You turn inward. You reclaim the energy you've been pouring into someone who isn't ready. You invest it into yourself. You build stronger boundaries. You choose clarity over chaos. You keep growing, not loudly or theatrically, but steadily, with intention. And in doing so, you create something far more powerful than persuasion, inspiration. Not everyone will rise with you, but the ones who are ready, they'll notice. Not because you dragged them, but because you led them. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when something inside you whispers, "I can't keep doing this." Not because you're bitter, not because you've stopped caring, but because you're empty. You've bent over backward. You've held space, stayed patient, tried everything. But things still don't change. They still don't get easier. And then you realize staying is costing you more than leaving ever will. And that is one of the hardest decisions you'll ever make. To walk away from someone who has become a part of your life, but poisons it little by little, because it's not always about violence or overt cruelty. Sometimes it's emotional neglect, guilt wrapped in love, a constant drip of disrespect, quiet, consistent, corrosive, and still you hesitate. Because walking away feels like failure, like giving up, like breaking something you were supposed to fix. But here's the deeper truth. Walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The Stoics understood this. They knew that peace is sometimes preserved not by enduring, but by releasing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear." How many of us aren't truly living, not because we lack opportunity, but because we're caught in relationships that quietly drain the life from us? We confuse endurance with love. We convince ourselves that loyalty means staying silent, staying small, staying stuck. But loyalty to others should never come at the expense of loyalty to yourself. If you are constantly sacrificing your emotional well-being for the illusion of peace, that's not a relationship. That's a prison. A beautiful cage with a nameplate that reads, "I'm just trying to keep the peace." Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And sometimes that anything includes staying in relationships we've outgrown, because we don't want to face the grief that comes with letting go. But endings aren't just about losing the other person. They're also about shedding old versions of yourself, the version that tolerated too much, that stayed quiet too long, that clung to hope while absorbing harm. Letting go doesn't mean failure. It means honoring the lesson without resenting the teacher. It's standing in your strength and saying, "Thank you for what you taught me, but I'm ready to grow without you." And yes, that is growth. It's a profound declaration of self-respect to choose peace over patterns, clarity over chaos, and truth over denial. Because when you finally step out of the toxic fog, you don't just gain distance. You regain yourself. Your mind clears. Your body feels lighter. You stop bracing for the next emotional landmine. And in that stillness, you start to remember who you were before you were made to feel small. Seneca once said, "As is a tale, so is life. Not how long it is, but how good it is what matters." So ask yourself honestly, is this relationship making your life richer, or just longer, heavier, harder to breathe in? Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's sanity, it's survival. And while the discomfort of walking away might sting at first, it fades. What replaces it is stronger. Dignity, clarity, freedom. But here's the part most people never talk about. Once the toxic person is gone, have you forgiven yourself? Not them. Not the one who lied or manipulated. You. Have you let go of the guilt, the shame, the quiet self-blame you've been dragging behind you? Because that's what lingers. Long after their voice is gone, yours remains. Why did I stay so long? Why didn't I see it sooner? How could I let this happen to me? That voice is subtle, but relentless, and it weighs more than the person ever did. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." But that choice only begins after release. Not just releasing them, but releasing the punishment you've inflicted on yourself. Self-forgiveness isn't denial, it's understanding. It's saying, yes, I missed the red flags. Yes, I lost myself. Yes, I stayed longer than I should have, but I'm still here. I'm still growing, and that is enough. Self-forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength in its purest form. It takes courage to sit with your pain, admit your part in it, and still offer yourself grace. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius didn't pretend the world was gentle. He reminded himself to meet it every morning as it truly was, He wrote, "Today I will meet the ungrateful, the arrogant, the dishonest. They act this way because they cannot tell good from evil." He wasn't just preparing for others. He was preparing himself to move through chaos without becoming it. Now picture this. You've been carrying a heavy bag for years, packed with regret, shame, unspoken pain. You've dragged it into every new relationship, into every new day. And maybe you told yourself you needed that bag to protect yourself, to remember the lessons, to never let it happen again. But what if putting it down didn't mean forgetting? What if it meant finally being free? Resentment is a prison we build for ourselves, brick by brick. It doesn't protect you, it isolates you. Self-forgiveness, that's tearing those walls down. One breath at a time. It's keeping the wisdom, but releasing the weight. It's not pretending everything's fine. It's saying, that chapter is over, and I don't need to keep rereading it to know what it taught me. Seneca said life should be measured not by length, but by depth. And dragging old pain doesn't deepen life. It just makes it heavier. So pause. Ask yourself, what am I still carrying that no longer serves me? What part of this story have I outgrown, but haven't yet released? You don't need a ceremony. You don't need a perfect moment. You just need willingness. The willingness to soften, to say, I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And that's enough. It's always been enough. Let this be that moment